Everyone to our third virtual book party. We will be continuing these on the third Tuesday, so the next one is scheduled for October 30th. There'll be a different group of people book talking. This is webinar style, so you can see us, but we can't see you, but you can use the chat feature to chat with us during the presentation. And we will be recording it because there's some people have asked to see it later, but again, you won't be seen at all. It will be showing the book jackets as people talk, so you'll be able to see the books and all. And then I'll be sending you a list of all the books when we are finished. Everyone who registered for this will get the list of books in case you miss out on jotting things down or something. I'm Allison. I'm one of the adult services librarians. I'm your host tonight. So I'm trying to keep this other group of librarians on track and timing them so their book talks are snappy and we move right along so we can get through 25 books. And I'll let the others introduce themselves.
What order do we want to go in? I'll just go because I've started talking first, but maybe I'll tap the next person so that we aren't all trying to talk at once. I'm Bridget.
Let's just do alphabetical. Sorry.
Alphabetical. Oh, that's easy. I'm Bridget. I'm one of the teen services librarians, and my pronouns are she and her.
And my name is Catherine. I'm one of the other teen services librarians, and my pronouns are also she and her.
My name is Mary, and I am one of the early literacy librarians, but today I'm talking about middle grade books, and my pronouns are also she and her. Ted?
My name is Ted. I use he and pronouns, and I'm one of the youth librarians.
And Marina?
My name is Marina Valenzuela. I'm the Spanish language librarian, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And Allison, have you properly introduced yourself?
I didn't say that my pronouns are she, her, hers. So
not that that's proper introduction, but I just want to make sure we didn't miss you.
I said what my job was and that I'm in control of the timer. I thought the timer was the important fact. So okay, we're going to get started. We'll be going in alphabetical order with our presenters. So we will get started with Bridget.
I'm very excited to talk about Meal. So it's a graphic novel, and I picked it up because I really love the art on the cover. And you might notice from the cover that this is a book that talks about eating insects. And it's about Yarrow, who has moved to a new town specifically because this chef that she's really interested in is opening a new restaurant. And this chef, their restaurant is going to use primarily insects as the protein. Yarrow is really excited about this. She goes to interview so that she can hopefully work at this restaurant, and then she does a very bad job. She does not impress the chef, but the chef does give her sort of a second chance. And this is her story of kind of figuring out living in a new place, making new friends, kind of there's a sweet little romance subplot that kind of comes in, and then also figuring out how to kind of get this dream job. And there's lots of interesting information about cooking with insects. There are recipes at the end of the book, and while some of them are perhaps a little more adventurous than I felt super prepared to tackle, I learned a lot, and I found it's funny and sweet and warm, and it's one that I recommend if you're at all curious about bugs and eating them. This is a really good kind of starting place. And you'll notice as we go through this evening, I have a theme for my books just because I'm the sort of person who felt like doing a theme tonight. I don't know. I don't always do themes.
Okay, Catherine.
Awesome. So I also have a theme. Mine's a lot darker than Bridget's is, it turns out, and mine was accidental. I did not intentionally choose all dark books. However, that's kind of how it started. So this one is The Blackbird Girls by Anne Blankman, and it's historical fiction. It is technically middle grade, but it deals with some heavier themes. So I'll give a content warning at the beginning. It does deal fairly heavily in child abuse. That's one of the major plot lines of the book, so I like to give that warning going in. But it is a historical fiction novel written about the Chernobyl disaster in 1986. And even though I was technically alive, I was 3 years old when that happened, so I didn't really know what was going on at the time. But it happened in my lifetime, and I still found as I was reading this book that I know almost nothing about Chernobyl. Like, I wasn't even 100% clear on which country it happened in. I don't know why, but in my mind it was always had happened in Russia, but it happened in Ukraine. So it was fascinating. But what happened, it follows two young girls whose both of their fathers are killed in the nuclear meltdown. And it follows them and their mothers in the aftermath of Chernobyl and their experiences. But there's also a second timeline where there's a story of a girl named Rivka in 1941, and she is a Jew who is fleeing the Ukraine. So this book does have some heavier themes. Not only does it have the Chernobyl meltdown, it has the Baba Yar massacre from the World War II. So if you're familiar with those stories. However, it is so good. The friendships and things that happen in it, I highly recommend it. And you will learn a lot about, it's not all dark and doom. You do learn a lot about that disaster and just the lives of these women.
Okay. And my screen is not advancing. Okay, there we go.
All right. This is a good title if you're looking for a little bit of escapism that's still rooted on social realities. So this is a story that centers around a taxidermied aardvark that mysteriously appears at the luxurious apartment of one Alexander Payne Wilson, who is an up-and-coming congressman. Now this aardvark connects him to this long history of which he has no concept initially, but connects these two kind of torrid gay romances through time in ways that are definitely surprising and are going to throw you for a loop and hopefully make you laugh as well. If you like the off-the-wall plots of authors like Carl Hiaasen or Christopher Moore, this might be a really good title for you. It's darkly funny, and it's a decisive takedown of many of the political intrigues that we are currently seeing. And yeah, if you need a little break that also doesn't get you too far away from things, this is a good choice.
Based on our practice session we had last week, I got this book out this weekend and read it, and I would like to second Marina's recommendation on this one.
It's fine. But if you need your protagonist to be likable, this might not be the book for you. Fair warning. The main protagonist is definitely a jerk, but that kind of makes everything that bad that happens to him like very delicious.
Why sometimes does it not move forward?
Because it knows we're presenting.
Okay, Mary.
Okay, so Catherine went ahead and made me feel super old when she mentioned that she was 3 when Chernobyl happened, because I was older than that. And this book, We Dream of Space by Erin and Trotta Kelly, is set in January of 1986, which some of us will remember where exactly we were when we heard about the Space Shuttle Challenger moment. I was in physical science class in 9th grade. So I was 14, 15 years old when it happened. So in this story, it is January of 1986, and the world is anticipating the launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger. 3 siblings, Cash, Fitch, and Bird, who are all in 7th grade because Cash got held back a year. They all have different levels of interest in the launch. Cash just wants to play basketball. Fitch spends every afternoon at the arcade. And Bird, well, Bird wants to be the first female shuttle commander. The 3 kids seem to live in their own separate worlds, and their parents are very little help, struggling to keep their marriage together. It seems that the 3 will never find a way to connect with each other until that fateful day of the shuttle launch. And I mean, I don't think I'm spoiling anything when I say it exploded. The kids who are reading this might not know that, though. So if you do recommend this to a kid, I don't know, you might want to give them a heads up or not. It depends on the child. Of course, you know those kids best. But Erin and Trotta Kelly, honestly, every book she writes is magic. She just weaves such wonderful stories, and this will leave you both heartbroken and hopeful.
You're
All right.
muted.
Yep, I know. So if you are, like me, absolutely sick about hearing about anything about J.K. Rowling, I have the perfect alternative for Harry Potter for you. This is Witch Hat Outlier, and it is absolutely delightful. It's a manga, so it's a graphic novel. It's about a girl named Coco who lives in a world where magic is limited to an extremely elect, extremely secretive number of witches. Coco falls desperately in love with magic when she's a little kid, and she's always wanted to join this world and always felt like she never actually could, right up until the point when she actually comes into contact with a real live witch, and he accidentally spills sort of their secret. And I'm not gonna, it's not really a spoiler to say that in this world, magic isn't spells and wands. It's all conducted by ink and paper, so it's more or less like drawing. So Coco decides that she is going to try to become a witch, which in this world is sort of like trying to become an artist. So if you're interested in something that, again, it's magical school, so if you're a fan of something like Harry Potter but would like something that is not Harry Potter, this would be a great one to pick up. Or if you are a fan of manga or frankly ink illustrations, because this is absolutely phenomenally illustrated. I was going to show you some of them, but then I realized that it probably wouldn't work too well on this in this format. But yeah, if you're a fan of magic or art or comics, this would be a great one to pick up.
So Buttermilk Graffiti, if you came in a bit early on our chat today, you saw Allison has a copy of the book. She got it recently. So this one I loved. It's sort of a combination, I can speak, of travelogue, memoir, and cookbook kind of all together. And the chef who wrote it, his name is Edward Lee, and each chapter deals with kind of a different place in America and different cuisine. And he traveled around to different places that are kind of areas with a large immigrant population. And he looked for dishes and foods that they brought with them from wherever they moved to America from. And then he talks to people, he tries all of these different foods, and he writes this one in this wonderful way. The way he writes about food is just really, really evocative, really, really interesting to read. I don't always agree with his takes, but I found the book very, very engaging. And the blend of sort of a look at America, a look at kind of what it is like to be an immigrant in America, and what it's like when food becomes kind of quote unquote Americanized. What does that look like? It's so interesting and really, really cool. The recipes, my one thing would be that the recipes in this one, many of them were complex enough that I was kind of like, I don't think I will attempt that. But it is really interesting to read about. And I kind of found this to be a good choice if you're feeling a little stir crazy at home and you want to get places. This lets you kind of explore America from your sofa. Good choice right now.
You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson is my one departure from very dark books this evening. It's a romantic comedy. I picked it up solely based on the cover, and that's a secret. Librarians do judge books by their cover, and we are drawn in by good cover art. So everybody does it. Don't feel bad if you've ever been taken in by a good cover. This one did not disappoint. It was just what I needed right now. It was light. It was funny. The characters were so great, and like the type of characters that you want to be friends with. So very different from Enter the Aardvark, where you don't want to, you're rooting for the main character to do badly. This one, you really want to be their friends and get to know them more. The main character is Liz Leidy. She is one of the only Black girls in her tiny Indiana town in the school that she goes to. And the story really centers around her involvement trying to become prom queen. She doesn't really care about prom or really so much being prom queen, but she desperately needs the scholarship money that's attached to that so that she can go to the elite music school that she's always dreamed of going to, because she lives with her grandparents. Both of her parents are dead, and they cannot afford to send her to this school. So she needs to win this scholarship. She's also at the same time crushing on the new girl who's just moved to town. And things go wrong when she discovers that this new girl is also competing for prom court. She's kind of a legacy that has been brought in because her mom was a prom queen when she was here. And so that's when sparks start to fly. Like I said, it is just so much fun. It's light, it's joyful. It was exactly what I needed. I also highly recommend the audiobook. The narrator is fantastic for it.
All right. Dominicana is an immigration story And I really liked it because it's set in New York in the 1960s. So not somebody who is from the East Coast or from New York, I still found the descriptions just so evocative of a place and time. And this is a story that centers around Anna. She's very young when this story starts. She's about 14 and she lives in the Dominican Republic with her family. Her family is very poor. And when she catches the eye of a much older man from another family who has begun the immigration process to the United States, her family kind of sees this as their ticket to any kind of wealth and power. So they convince her to accept his offer of marriage and move all by herself to New York with this strange older man and his family. And that's really where the story takes off. What I loved about this was just reading how Anna navigates this new world, this new language, this new culture. It's also a very tumultuous time. I mean, this is the 1960s. So while she doesn't totally understand what's going on, we still see glimpses of the civil rights movement and all the organizing and political activism that was going on around that time. And of course, Anna, being young, she is also very much into Juan Ruiz, her husband's younger brother, who's much more her type. And so there's some tensions there as she's trying to navigate who she is and what she wants in this new world. So if you're looking for a strong female character, amazing kind of slice of history, and also a really good immigrant story, I recommend this one to you.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself there. Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky. I mean, it has a great title already. But this book is from Rick Riordan Presents, and you might know Rick Riordan's name from his series of books, The Lightning Thief or the Magnus Chase books. And what he's created his own imprint where he is publishing books by diverse authors. And they're also sort of steeped in different mythologies, and I've read most of them and they're all amazing, so I recommend everything that he publishes under this imprint. But this series, Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mbalia, this is a story of becoming the hero you want to be, woven in with African and Black mythologies and storytelling. Tristan is set to live with his grandparents over the summer because his family believes that working on their farm will help Tristan get over the death of his best friend. His best friend died in a school bus accident, and Tristan was in the same accident, and Tristan believes he failed to save his friend and be the hero his friend needed. So he's got his friend's journal to keep him company, but one night that is stolen by a creature that Tristan only knew from stories, the gum baby. Tristan follows the gum baby out into the forest and accidentally breaks one of the bottles that hangs from the bottle tree, a place to hold haints or evil spirits. When the haint he releases breaks a hole between Tristan's world and the world of Anansi the spider, Brer Rabbit, and John Henry, it's up to Tristan to save the day and become the hero he wishes he were. And there will be a sequel, I believe, coming out either later this month or in October. So I'm a little late to the Tristan Strong party, but I highly, highly recommend it.
All right, an ongoing theme with me is manga. So this is our Dreams at Dusk. Still holding it for some reason. This is Our Dreams at Dusk. If you are a fan of, again, manga or realistic, this is realistic LGBTQ fiction. It's about a high schooler named Tasuku Kaname who has just moved to a little sleepy seaside town. And he's the new kid, so of course there's already a ton of pressure with fitting in. Unfortunately, some other kids either find or imply that they found some gay erotic work on his phone. And so he is, of course, being made fun of. He denies it. He is extremely distraught about it. At one point, he doesn't explicitly say it, but he does kind of consider the idea of committing suicide. But when he's up on a bridge, he asks a mysterious woman who is just passing by what she thinks, and she essentially essentially says either jump or don't jump, it really doesn't matter. And he's so shocked by this. It's so disturbing and weird and not what he was expecting. He follows her, and it turns out she actually runs the local drop-in center for LGBTQ folks in the city. He starts getting to know them and or some of the other people who come into the drop-in center, starts getting to know their stories. And this series kind of goes into different aspects of different characters' lives. So it's really about found family. It's also his kind of coming out and coming of age story. One of the things that I really loved about this, it is extremely realistic. Like, full disclosure, I'm gay and I was also closeted in high school. So I kind of, this was extremely realistic, kind of like processing those feelings. But also there was just enough like little touches of like whimsy and fantasy to really keep the story from being completely depressing or moribund. But yeah, if you're a fan, again, of manga or like realistic kind of coming of age stories, this would be a great one to pick up. I don't know how many are in the series. I think like 3, 4, something like that now. So.
So this book is written kind of for like 12, 13-year-old students, but I think it works really well for an adult reader as well, and maybe as a read aloud for a younger reader. Midsummer's Mayhem plays on, if you're familiar with the themes from A Midsummer Night's Dream, it plays with that, and main character Mimi has this celebrity chef that she's very excited about, very into, and there's a new tiny bakery, a cafe in her town that has opened, and they sort of offer a contest where kids can enter and potentially win an internship at the bakery, but also a chance to meet this chef that she really idolizes. And so she decides to enter, and it's got the competition element, if you like those, but what she slowly sort of discovers is there's something special about this bakery. So this is a story with fairies and magic and mystery, as well as delicious baked goods. The food just sounds so amazing. This is not a book to read hungry. There are recipes at the end for some of the delicious treats she makes. I wish there were recipes for everything mentioned in the book. There are not. But this is a really wonderful kind of late summer read. It just has this fabulous feel of magic and family and figuring stuff out. There's the mystery element. She, unlike us who perhaps know about A Midsummer Night's Dream, she does not. So she does not expect fairies, right? And it's very fun. It's a standalone story, and it's one that, whether you are an adult reader or younger, I think it would be a good choice to pick it up if you're looking for a light story.
That looks adorable.
The Sound of Stars is not a light story. I'm a sucker for science fiction books where aliens have invaded and the humans have lost. The kind of hopeless, we've lost Earth at this point because aliens took over. So not quite Independence Day where we fended them off, the aftermath if the Independence Day aliens had successfully taken over. And this is one of those stories. So The Sound of Stars by Alicia Dow is really interesting because on the surface, yes, it's a sci-fi story about a small band of humans trying to overthrow the aliens and the mind control that the aliens are enforcing on the humans that are left. But it's also very much a story about, like, what does it mean to be human, who gets to be included in that, and all sorts of other different layers. There's so many things that are addressed in this story, and I loved it so much. Again, it has an excellent audiobook if you like audiobooks. I was initially drawn in because the premise, the main character is an aspiring librarian. So in the world where the aliens have taken over, books are illegal, music is illegal, all of these things, but she has hidden 85 books in a mattress in the basement of her apartment building, and she lends them out to the other people who live in the building with her. And the story actually gets started when her copy of The Hate U Give goes missing, and she's pretty sure that the aliens have found it. And in fact, one of them has, his name is MOR1S, or Morris as they call him throughout. He's a genetically engineered alien who has been put in charge of executing kind of what they see as the final solution for taking control of the humans. It's this mind control thing that's about to be implemented with all humans. And he takes pity on them because he has a secret love of music. He's fallen in love with pop music. And he and Ellie inexplicably band together on this cross-country road trip to go and try to stop this final mind control takeover. It's so good. There's a lot going on, but I highly recommend it. Yes.
We do have a request, sorry, Marina, that if we could let the audience know when something we're book talking is a graphic novel. So
This is not a graphic novel. So this is a nonfiction work. It is a little on the scholarly side. It is a historical work, and it's a little older too. So most of the books that I'm book talking today were published in the last year or two. This one, I think, is 2013. But I want to include it because there's so much in this book that really helps us understand the current social and political landscape. And also this really opened my eyes to the lasting impact that the Black Panther Party had in the United States and in fact worldwide. So whether you're talking about present day social welfare programs, critical race theory, strategies for social change, case law, and then the ongoing movement for racial justice, this book has you covered. It's for a history book, it's not dense. It reads like a novel in some ways. You really get to know all of the major leaders of the movement. And there's a lot of history covered here that I honestly never learned in school, and I bet a lot of us never did. So if you're looking to better understand the present day moment, if you also just have a lot of curiosity about what makes for a successful social change movement, I recommend picking up this book and giving it a read.
And now for something completely different. Books like this are so right up my alley. Plucky Victorian English girls who defy gender roles of the time and solve mysteries. Woo, I love those books. I will always read them. This one definitely did not disappoint. It's actually not out yet. It's coming out in October, however, so look forward to it. The sequel is coming out on the same day. So if you like one, you get two for the price of one. Myrtle is the name of the character, so hence the title, Premeditated Myrtle. Myrtle longs to become a detective, and she is aided in her studies by her governess, who supports Myrtle's interest in all things investigatory, be it a study of poisons, fingerprints, or how to follow a suspect. When Myrtle's next-door neighbor is found dead, Myrtle becomes embroiled in the investigation when she becomes convinced the death was not from natural causes, based on one piece of information. Why would her neighbor, a master gardener with prize-winning lilies, tell her groundskeeper to destroy the lilies on the night before she died? So Myrtle puts her own family at risk, but is determined to prove that she has the skills needed to solve the case in this well-plotted and page-turning story. So this will be released in October along with a sequel, which will be called How to Get Away with Myrtle.
I think the name Myrtle should be used in more books. That's
Agreed.
All right, so I don't think that I don't think most of you viewing this are in the target demographic for Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but you might have nieces, nephews, students, other readers who enjoy Diary of a Wimpy Kid, or maybe you do as well. Personally, I think journal books are hysterical when they're done well. I don't think Diary is very funny in and of itself. But if you do have anyone who's a fan of that, I would highly recommend Jake the Fake. It's a newish series about a kid named Jake who has been selected to go to this magnet school for gifted and talented students in the arts. The only trouble with that is that Jake is not actually very talented at anything. The only reason that he got into the school in the first place was he doesn't actually know how to play the piano. He knows how to play one song on the piano extremely well. So he played that at the audition, got in, and he's now spending all of his days at school freaking out, thinking that everyone's going to find out that he's this huge phony, that they're going to kick him out of school. He's going to have to, everyone's going to know that he's not as talented as his older sister, who is essentially like the queen of the school. And then his friend comes up with, I think, a brilliant solution. One day they're talking, and his friend is like, dude, you go to an art school. Like, you can get away with anything. Just tell them that it's part of your art. You can tell them to address you as like the Lord Emperor of the Penguins. You can roll around in the trash cans and say that it's an expressive dance. Like, you can do anything you want. Just call it art and nobody's gonna know. I'm not gonna give away like, well, I mean, I think you've got generally what happens. This book is absolutely hysterical from start to finish. Jake actually does have a really unique artistic talent that kind of comes out at the end. He just didn't kind of realize it at the time. So it's also got, and if you have readers who are really interested in the illustrations are also a ton of fun. So yeah, it feels a lot, the humor is really on point. It's a lot of fun. And also, again, it's just, I love the idea of just getting away with anything in art school. It's all art, so none of it matters. Yeah, but that's Jake the Fake.
Ted is the author. Craig Robinson, is he the Craig Robinson who was part of The Office?
I completely forgot to look
He
that
is,
up.
yes, I did. I looked it up. He played Daryl in The Office, if you're familiar with The Office.
That's another reason why it's funny.
Oh,
Okay. Cake.
So I was building to this all the way through. This is an actual cookbook. Look at this. Okay. So Grandbaby Cakes, Jocelyn, she has a website that you can visit as well, but I have this cookbook and it has delicious recipes. I have made that one on the cover. That is a blackberry red velvet cake with a cream cheese and blackberry frosting, and it was exceptionally delicious and not as hard as that picture makes it look. And one of the things that I think works so well about this, the reason I'm recommending this as a book to read, I recognize we don't always sit down to read cookbooks, right? But what Jocelyn does is she has all of these stories. Her recipes come, she has kind of updated and modernized recipes from her family. The women from her mother, her grandmother, her aunties have made these recipes throughout the years. And so each recipe, before the recipe, there's this little sort of interlude about her family and about the people that these recipes came from. And I loved the way that you get these snapshots of what food means to people. That for me is one of my favorite things about reading about food, is the way it's used to connect each other, right? And this cookbook, I think, does a really good job of giving you delicious cakes, exceptional cakes. There's a cornbread pound cake in here that's awesome. Every recipe I've made from this has been really, really yummy. I have not made every recipe in the book. Surprise, perhaps not. But it is fun, and I recommend reading it, even if you don't necessarily read the recipes cover to cover. If you read those interludes, I think you might really enjoy her story, like her family in Chicago and her family in Mississippi, and just really interesting and warm stories that also involve delicious cake. So, you know, it's a win all around.
Yes.
And now I want cake. That's what that does for me. Agnes at the End of the World, when I first picked it up, it seems like a weird time to read apocalypse fiction this year. And particularly this one, Agnes at the End of the World, was described as Handmaid's Tale meets Wilder Girls, which I really liked Wilder Girls, but I would actually call it more Handmaid's Tale meets COVID-19 2020. It's very, very on point for this year, actually, which is uncanny. The author actually has a note. She added a note as it was being published that she had the idea to write this story about a virus pandemic, worldwide virus pandemic, years ago, and she had no idea that it would be released this year as the pandemic was hitting, because it came out in like March or April, right as everything was shutting down, which was uncanny timing, really, for her. But Agnes at the End of the World is a very different type of virus in this story. The main character is Agnes, and it's really the story of she and her family. Agnes and Beth are two sisters. They're the main characters of the story. You get to see it from their perspective. They have been raised in a very ultra-religious, very, very isolated, cult-like community. Agnes is pretty unique. When she was younger, she believed that she was hearing the voice of God, and it sort of alluded to that she is potentially the next prophet for this religious group, although women are not really allowed to be. But she has a secret. She has been communicating with the outside world because her baby brother has type 1 diabetes, and they shun most medical treatment within this community. And so she has been meeting this nurse to get the insulin that he needs. And the story kind of gets going when the nurse tells her that she's not going to be able to meet her anymore because she has to be at the hospital because this virus is mysteriously and rapidly spreading through the worldwide community, and they don't really know what's going to happen. It is so fascinating. The juxtaposition of the two sisters, they are very, very different. They have very different outlooks. But as their story progresses, I love that story of sisters. I will kind of give the warning. This is, in reading other reviews of it, it's pretty divisive. Some people find the very strong religious overtones pretty off-putting. So really, I would kind of make that choice as you will, if it's something you're into. But if you enjoyed The Handmaid's Tale, I do highly recommend it.
This book was a delight for me personally. It's very much a little slice of life story. However, I acknowledge that this might be a challenge for those who are not comfortable speaking or reading Spanish. So the author, Juliana Delgado Lopera, took a very unusual decision in writing this book, and the entire book is written in Spanglish. So the main character, Francisca, she's a teenager. She's been uprooted from her home in Colombia. Her mom decided all of a sudden that they're going to move to Miami to live with her grandmother and the rest of her family. It's unclear exactly what's going on in the family, but we get the impression that the mom is probably going through something and decides that her outlet is going to be going to this tiny evangelical church in a mini mall somewhere, and Francisca hates every second of it. So as she's telling the story of kind of her first summer in Miami, like I said, the author slides between Spanish and English seamlessly, really reflecting the character's experience as she moves through these two cultures and how she thinks about some things in one language and some things in another. Now, Francisca is trying to find a place to fit in, and she decides, all right, well, if the only place I'm allowed to go is church, I'm going to make friends at church. So she starts getting involved with her local youth group, and unfortunately or fortunately for Francisca, she also discovers that amidst all of this linguistic, cultural confusion, she also is starting to develop a crush on the pastor's daughter. So of course, this is very much frowned upon and she doesn't know what to do about it, but there sure does seem to be a lot of tension when they go out to proselytize in front of the mini mall. So she's working through all of these things. This was a glorious, messy, emotional, coming of age story that I really enjoyed and I recommend, even if the Spanish might be challenging. If anything, you'll be feeling the same thing that the character is throughout this entire book. So it's a fun one. Thanks.
Sorry, I'm flipping between screens because I have my book talks written out, and so I'm like keep forgetting to unmute myself before I flip the screen. Keep it together, Keiko Carter. I very much could relate to this character. Keiko Carter is the peacemaker in her little friends group of 3 people. She's the one who keeps her little group of friends happy and working. But after a summer where one of the group has been away, they seem fragmented and drifting apart. The problem? Guess what, boys? As they start 7th grade, Audrey is convinced the 3 of them need boyfriends. Jenna is not so sure, and she's harboring a secret crush. Keiko just wants everyone to get along and agree. Can't everyone just get along? But when things between Audrey and Jenna blow up, how can Keiko fix it so things go back to the way they were? Or will they ever go back to the way they were? This is a very realistic take on friendships and growing up, and will resonate with middle schoolers and upper elementary kids alike. Plus, the main character eats a lot of chocolate because that is her thing. So she always has really fancy chocolates that she's talking about. So if you like chocolate, I actually won a copy of this, an ARC of it before it came out, an advanced reader copy from the author, Debbie Michiko Flores. Debbie Michiko, no, I'm sorry, I'm getting her last name wrong. But it's on the cover, Debbie Michiko Florence. I had it right. and she sent me the book and some fancy ruby chocolates with it, so which was pretty cool. Debbie Michiko Florence has been writing mostly early reader and early chapter books, but this is her first middle grade, and it's really outstanding. Highly recommended.
All right, so I'm a children's librarian. I very rarely get to talk about adult literature, so bear with me. This is The Korolov Affair by Irene Nemirovsky. If you're interested in, Second World War period biographies, I would highly recommend looking into her life. She was fascinating. She immigrated from Russia to France before the Second World War, of course, and tragically died at Auschwitz. But before she died, she left behind a really impressive body of work. This is one of her few novels. It's actually kind of interesting. She grew up in Russia. This is actually one of the few novels of hers, or not few, but this is my favorite of hers that deals specifically with Russia. It's about a revolutionary named Leon who who is tasked right before the Russian Revolution with essentially sneaking back into Russia and becoming extremely close with the grotesque Minister of Education named Korolov. He is this brutal, hulking, almost inhuman person who is extremely aggressive in suppressing student uprisings. Leon is tasked with assassinating him, and to do that, he becomes the personal physician of Korolov, and that's when things get kind of interesting. This isn't a terribly long book, and it wasn't really quite the political intrigue that I thought it was going to be. There's almost this sort of strange and unspoken understanding between Korolov and Leon. Leon is, of course, waiting to assassinate him. Korolov is very nearing the end of his life, and there's this also sort of absurdity about it. Why am I assassinating this person who is essentially drinking himself to death at 50? He looks like he's about to die at any moment. But if you are interested, again, in historical fiction, this would be a really good one to pick up. It's also not a terribly long commitment. I think it's like 150 pages. So yeah, that is The Korolov Affair. Would very highly recommend if you're interested in pre-revolutionary Russian history, or just in sort of political intrigue that's not really political intrigue. Would be a great option.
So I am actually talking about Bridget's last book. This is Sourdough by Robin Sloan, so it's adult fiction. And so this is, if all this pandemic baking hasn't really worked out for you, just sit down and read about it instead. The main character in this is a young woman who leaves her tech job because she becomes obsessed with trying to create the perfect sourdough bread, and she ends up working at this incredibly upscale, very elite market in the San Francisco Bay Area. But it goes from quirky to just plain odd when things go wrong at the farmer's market, and the yeast from the brewery escapes, and there's a microbial war with her sourdough. But it's really also, it's funny, she's a lovable character, and it will make you crave bread, but maybe just buy some, if the whole baking thing, and if you don't want to have a microbial war break out at your house. But it's a light, easy book to read. It's a delight.
So my last one is The Light in Hidden Places. It's also a historical fiction, going back to that. It is an excellent choice if you enjoyed The Diary of Anne Frank, but you really wanted The Diary of Anne Frank to be about 300 pages longer. Not to say that it's a bad thing. It's a fascinating story. It is also a true story, much like The Diary of Anne Frank, although it's not like autobiographical. But it tells the story of these two sisters, Stefania and Helena Podgorska, who were Catholic Polish girls at the beginning of World War II. They were 16 and 8 years old, and this is their story. Their parents were taken to a work camp at the beginning of the war, and Stefania, or Fusia as she was called, was left to raise her little sister, her 8-year-old sister. And over the course of the war, they ended up hiding Jews from the ghetto in the town where they lived. And by the end of the war, they were hiding 13 Jews in their attic. And they were also having to house 2 Nazi soldiers downstairs. So they had 13 Jews hiding behind a tiny wall in the attic, and the Nazis living downstairs in the bedrooms right below them. And so this is a true story. It's very fascinating. I actually went and Googled a whole lot more to find out, what was true from the book versus what was made up. But it was a really interesting look, really inside of Stefania's experience through all of this, kind of what are the long-term effects of that kind of stress and strain, trying to feed 13 people in secret when everything is rationed, and make sure that they don't move because any sound will make them suspect it. They actually at one point bought a whole flock of chickens to keep in the house to cover up the sounds of the Jews when they would move around during the day who were hiding. So it's a fascinating, fascinating story. And unlike the Diary of Anne Frank, it ends on a much more hopeful note. One of the notable things about these young women is that they managed to keep all of these people alive until the end of the war. It's historical, so it's not really a spoiler. But if you're wanting something that ends slightly more hopefully than most World War II stories, I highly recommend The Light in Hidden Places.
Might have changed order by mistake here.
What did you say, Allison? Sorry, I didn't hear what you just said, Allison.
I must have skipped Marina's. We'll be back to it, but go ahead, Mary.
The list of things that will not change. Rebecca Stead is another author that, like Erin and Trada Kelly, I will read everything she writes. She's written some books that I think have won numerous awards. And this is her latest. It came out last spring. And it centers on probably about a 12-year-old. I can't remember exact, 10 to 12, I think. And her name is Bee, and Bee is not a fan of change. So when her parents get divorced, she begins a notebook. And actually at the recommendation by her therapist, she begins a notebook and keeps a list in there of things that will not change. And number 1 on that list is that her parents will always love her. Another thing that has lately appeared on her list is that Jesse will always be her father's boyfriend. And when Jesse and her father announce they're getting married, Bee is thrilled. First of all, she decides that she needs to plan the wedding. So she gets very involved in that. But also, Jesse has a daughter who lives out with her mother out in California. And finally, Bee will get to meet her and have a sister. But Jesse's daughter doesn't feel quite the same way that Bee does about the marriage. And the perfect family dynamic that Bee has envisioned doesn't happen the way she wants it to. So how will Bee handle this big change? This is a warm-hearted story for upper elementary kids who are dealing with unexpected and unwanted change. And it reminds us all that through everything, there is love, and that will not change.
I almost want to end it on that note because that was so beautiful, Mary. So this is, to go back to science fiction for a second, if you enjoy your science fiction on an epic, universe-straddling, time-spanning scale, you may enjoy The Vanished Birds by Simone Jimenez. I was, of course, immediately drawn to this amazing cover, and the story inside turned out to be just as great as I hoped for. So this story generally follows Nia, who captains her own spaceship, and the way the story is structured, if you can imagine a stone skipping across water, that's kind of how the time flows in this novel, because the way that she travels through space, it takes about 15 years each way. So every time she meets up with her friends, with her family, with her work associates, it's always going to be 15 years later. And so it creates this really stretched out sense of time. And what happens is on one of her trips, the community that she is trading with says, hey, we have this mysterious boy here who crash landed on our planet. We don't quite know what's going on. We don't want to keep him because that whole thing seems kind of weird. Here, will you take him, and good luck. And so with that, she takes on this mysterious boy, And it turns out that he has a very special gift that is going to change their entire universe. So if you want to find out what the answer to that mystery is, and also enjoy a really good cast of characters and a well-plotted book, I recommend The Vanishing Birds by Simone Jimenez.
Right back into where I feel most comfortable speaking. This is middle grade fiction. This is A Wish in the Dark. It's one of my, it's one of the most, I read a ton of course, children's lit, but this is one of the more interesting ones I've read recently. It's about these two kids named Pong and Sankit who are born inside a prison. In this, in the city that they're born in, if their mothers are incarcerated, they have to carry out the rest of the sentence if their mothers die, which both of them have. Now, conditions in the prison are, of course, horrific, but Pong is actually extremely excited when this book opens because they are getting an official visit from the governor of their city. In this world, or in the city, everything that, all of their power, heat, energy, all of it comes from this mysterious light that only the governor knows how to make. So of course, Pong thinks that this person is incredible. He's going to be wonderful and generous and noble, and he's going to hear about how terrible conditions are in the prison and how unjust this is, and he's going to let everyone out. Unfortunately, that's not what happens. The governor comes to the prison, essentially starts talking with Pong, and essentially tells him, if you're born inside a place like this, you are destined to keep returning to this place. This is your destiny. People who are essentially born on the fringes of society like you are, this is the best that you can hope for. Pong, of course, is crushed. He essentially decides at one point to escape from the prison. And it turns out that Pong might have a very particular talent that most people thought only the governor could produce. So if you're a fan of, it's sort of like middle grade magical realism, lots of realistic elements, but also, of course, a ton of fantasy and a ton of really interesting questions. I loved how this was put together. So if any of that sounds interesting, would highly recommend this.
Allison, you're muted.
That was our last book. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for
And
joining
thanks
us.
for all of you for listening to our book recommendations. Again, tomorrow I'll be sending you a list of all the books we talked about with links to our catalogs if you want to place things on order. And you know, you're now welcome to come back in and browse the library, so you can make an appointment to visit us if you go to arapahoelibraries.org. If you don't make an appointment, most of the libraries have walk-in capacity and can add you as an appointment. So we really look forward to seeing you in all of our branches now as well.
Yes.
And join us for our next book party on October 20th.
Yes.
Excited to give you more recommendations.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Have a great
Have
night.
a good afternoon. I guess it is nighttime. Have a good night.